While Hollywood has given us some spectacular hits, we often find that we discover some incredible hidden gems when we expand our worldview and explore the artworks put out by different cultures. I mean, as Bong Joon-Ho puts it, we would be introduced to many amazing films when we overcome the 1-inch tall barrier of subtitles, and in some cases, you might not even have to put in all that effort. Especially within the sci-fi genre, you'd be surprised to know just how many gems from other parts of the world can be easily accessed, and today I want to take a moment to shed light on Soviet cinema. From Moscow-Cassiopeia to Under the Constellation Gemini, Soviet cinema has blessed us with some excellent sci-fi gems in the 1970s. So without further ado, let's dive right in as I take you through some of these top films that you might just have missed. Solaris, 1972. Starting off strong, I'm sure hardcore sci-fi fans must at least be familiar with the name Solaris, which was directed by Andrei Tarkovsky and released with much critical acclaim in 1972. Known best for its unconventional techniques that were a refreshing contrast to the special effects and whiz-bang action that defined most sci-fi films at the time, Solaris remains culturally relevant exactly because it steered away from the typical formula laid down for this genre. The film was set in the titular distant planet of Solaris, which was made of water and had a space station circling around it. The film picks up pace when one of the 3 scientists on the station dies a mysterious death, leaving an investigator named Chris with the responsibility of traveling to the station and investigating the matter. Now, his arrival comes with the shock that the other 2 scientists are uncommunicative and the station is a mess, but this isn't even the worst of his troubles, as he soon starts seeing his dead ex-wife in front of his eyes. What starts out as a mission to uncover the mysteries of death takes a shocking turn, especially as Chris discovers that the water on Solaris can bring out one's repressed memories. The film was inspired by Polish writer Stanisław Lem's book by the same name, and was an outstanding depiction of the story on the big screen, with its emphasis on the daily life and environment of the space station scientists as opposed to a grand space story. This is also what made the film such a cult classic, as Tarkovsky's method of using pictures and sounds to tell more than the immediate story takes us to a whole different dimension where reality and fantasy often blend together. One might feel as if they are witnessing someone else's lived experiences, and the film almost plays out as an evolutionary tale as the subconscious grows over time and gives us a brand new perspective on the human condition. Ivan Vasilovich, Back to the Future, 1973. Released as a sci-fi comedy by Leonid Gaidai, Ivan Vasilovich, Back to the Future is a 1973 film inspired by Mikhail Bulgakov's play by the same name. The plot starts out in Moscow, where an engineer works on a time machine and ends up sending Superintendent Ivan Vasilovich, as well as a burglar, to the 16th century, to an era where the Tsar Ivan IV, the Terrible, was all in his glory. Now, as they disguise themselves, Ivan ends up filling in the Tsar's shoes while the real Ivan IV shows up in the modern day, where he adjusts to life and bides his time until the engineer figures out a way to fix his machine and restore all these lives. The real fun begins when the superintendent and the real Tsar's similar features land them in situations where they are mistaken for one another and have to tackle obstacles that they definitely did not ever dream of. The film also involves a whole lot of social satire, and its original title, Ivan Vasilyevich Changes Profession, might just be the more witty, accurate way to describe it in one phrase. While it is not a typical sci-fi with fancy gadgets, it is a powerful reminder that a well-written story, engaging dialogue, and an entertaining premise with a sprinkle of comedy is sometimes all that it takes to make a classic. To its credit, the film was one of the most attended films in the Soviet Union, and with more than 60 million tickets sold, the numbers alone do the talking, and are enough to convince you to give it a watch. Moscow-Cassiopeia, 1974. Directed by Richard Viktorov, Moscow-Cassiopeia was a rather inventive release in the Soviet sci-fi genre space, and it was released in 1974 with the premise that young pioneers are all set to embark on a space journey. Yes, you heard it right. The film follows a group of young people on the Zarya as they travel toward the star Alpha Cassiopeia, a journey of 26 years, so that by the time they arrive, they'll be in their 40s. Now, A majority of the plot is set before their travels as they gather at the Academy of Sciences and learn all about the intricacies of the travel while their journey becomes the talk of the town. From being on the front page of the Russian tabloids to even traveling to the Red Square to salute Lenin's mausoleum, their pre-adventure checklist is a whole adventure in itself. But by the end of it all, they eventually end up in the spaceship as it accidentally activates and launches due to the impulse actions of Fedka Labonov, a boy who had sneaked on board just before departure. While the film ends with a glimpse into their mission as the crew safely survives for about 27 years, Labonov does regret his decision to sneak onto the ship, while the crew eventually accepts him as the 7th member on their mission. Often considered to be a mix between Star Wars and Doctor Who, the film's premise does make for an intriguing watch, and if this was not enough, Moscow-Cassiopeia was swiftly followed by a sequel, Teens in the Universe. Teens in the Universe, 1975. Coming right to the sequel, this film was released in 1975 and was also directed by Richard Viktorov and was written by Isai Kuznetsov. It also retained the same popularity as the original, and it was actually intended to be a single film that was only split into two 80-minute features somewhere along the way. While the first part ends with about 27 years passing on Earth, while the 7-member crew on the Zarya inches closer to their destination, the second part begins with them unexpectedly arriving in the Shidar system. They also discover that the planets bear similarities to Earth, and while they make plans to send 3 of them with reconnaissance capsules to explore the new planet, our wildcard Labanov finds a strange creature who is more than happy to show them the underground cities. Now, this does stir up trouble when they lose radio communications while the remaining members on board the Zarya come across another giant spaceship. This interaction only helps them learn that this planet has 2 kinds of bionic robots, wherein one type includes executors, while the other consists of advanced rulers, whose meddling had resulted in devastating consequences for the planet. With half their population dead, the crew on board the Zarya decides that it is time to send reinforcements to rescue their members who had bravely ventured into the depths of the planet's underground city. What starts out as a shockingly almost unethical mission to send miners on a historic space mission soon turns into a nail-biting finale, and the premise alone is something that I could never have imagined. The series also went on to win several Sci-Fi awards and popularized space and technology to a whole generation of Soviet Union kids. And with its whimsical setting, I'd definitely recommend that you check this one out for when you want something out of the box. The Flight of Mr. McKinley, 1975. Directed by Mikhail Schweitzer, The Flight of Mr. McKinley largely revolves around the titular character's attempts to escape into the future through measures such as hibernation. Now, the sci-fi fantasy does begin with him getting exactly what he wanted, as he wakes up feeling quite lucky about the hibernation plan working out. However, the grass is often greener on the other side, and in Mr. McKinley's case, he had left greener pastures behind to land in a futuristic post-atomic war desert. Blending sci-fi with life lessons on how one must be content with their circumstances rather than figuring out escapes from them, this film does an excellent job of depicting the horrors of Western life, especially as McKinley contemplates morally corrupt acts such as seducing and murdering a rich old woman to fund his hibernation. It is a film that does not just delve into the sci-fi elements of the modern world, but rather also raises questions on what they really mean for us through McKinley's desire for personal fulfillment. His dreams continue to be postponed amidst lingering anxiety over an impending nuclear war for so long that eventually it drives him to resort to insane measures to desperately bring these aspirations to life. Eolomea, 1972. Turning back to themes of space fiction and fantasy, Eolomea was a 1972 release directed by Hermann Socha, which was inspired by Angel Wagenstein's novel by the same name. The film starts out in a classic sci-fi manner, with disturbances being reported at the Margot space base as ships and crew members disappear out of nowhere. As this compels the Institute of Space Research to place a temporary flight ban to the area, we learn that their disappearances could be linked to an unusual phenomenon that was kept under wraps for the longest time. However, things unravel to reveal that a mysterious light in the Cygnus constellation appears every 24 years and is responsible for these events, while Soviet astronomers suggest that the light could be an artificial signal. With more research, the signal is linked to Earth's symmetrical twin, Eolomea, and an overeager Professor Tal tries to initiate a mission to this planet to be shut down by the Council immediately. However, the film's most talked talked about moment is when young scientists from all over the world refuse to sit by and instead take drastic action by seizing rockets and embarking on this dangerous mission without any formal approvals. Their curiosity towards the unknown and extraterrestrial intelligence is quite inspiring, and if you're ever in the mood to witness a life-changing space mission, this one is right up your alley. Inquest of Pilot Pirx. Brought to the screens on a rather low budget, Inquest of Pilot Pirx was one of the most defining films in the sci-fi genre in the late 70s, with its premise involving themes of humans and human-like robots coexisting in a strange world. The film's story revolves around a corporation that manufactures intelligent androids amidst much resistance, and eventually comes up with a proposition to send a crew of humans and androids on a space mission. Now, the mission is simple enough, with the main task being placing 2 probes on Saturn's rings, but what the crew does not realize is that the underlying aim was to observe the human-robot interactions. With Commander Pirx leading the mission, things do take an interesting turn when the androids appear as perfect replicas of humans, making it hard to differentiate between their identities. Now, some of them do come forth and reveal their true identities, but the chaos gets to Commander Pirx as he starts feeling paranoid about their true identities. To make matters worse, a rogue group tries to sabotage the event, and the climax has a rather shocking turn. But without spoiling it all, I will say that this film is packed with drama and nail-biting revelations. Especially in an age where artificial intelligence's rise only makes it a matter of time before we might have such lifelike androids in the real world, Pilot Pirx's Inquest is a film that stands the test of time and remains culturally relevant even today. Stalker, 1979. While you might not have explored Soviet cinema in all its glory, I'm sure you might have heard of Andrei Tarkovsky's genius when it comes to cinema, and Stalker is definitely one of his most talked about masterpieces. Released in 1979, the film was inspired by the 1972 novel Roadside Picnic, and followed our titular stalker as he guides his audience of 2, including a melancholic writer and a professor, across supernatural wastelands. This space, known as the Zone, is essentially open land where normal laws of physics do not apply, and while many shiver at the thought of stepping into this space, the stalker unfortunately needs the money and signs up for this gig. As he leads his audience across supernatural obstacles while also evading military guards, their journey brings them face to face with the most disturbing artifacts imaginable, ranging from human remains to abandoned industrial facilities and corpses and weapons. However, the film's beauty lies in these challenges, as they cross any and all hurdles while trying to find the room at the heart of this zone. While it is said that the room can grant the wishes of anyone who steps inside, the trio discusses their reasons behind trying to find it and draw us into a world of philosophy, as the writer even delivers an unforgettable monologue about the futility of knowledge, while the stalker recites a poem about dissatisfaction. Now, these instances are even repeated at the end of the film, as the stalker's wife expresses her desire to lead an interesting life over an easy, boring one in another soliloquy, while his daughter seemingly performs telekinesis and even recites a poem. This film takes you on a wild ride with so many striking elements packed into a neat package, and the more you watch it, the more it all makes sense and comes together. Admittedly, philosophical, spiritual themes being discussed against the backdrop of hazardous wastelands might seem like there's too much going on at once, but I'd say that you must sit back and trust Tarkovsky's genius at making it all happen in one film. Contact, 1978. If full-length philosophical features aren't your thing, then let me present you with a refreshing recommendation. Contact. This 10-minute animated Soviet film was directed by animator Vladimir Tarasov and released in 1978 as a striking psychedelic film that will keep you glued to the screen for its entirety. While it begins with a snapshot of a Soviet cartoon nature, a plot twist barely 3 minutes into the film takes you on a journey as a painter and an alien try to establish communication between one another. Initially, their interactions are filled with hesitation and fear, but the bemused alien's attempts at establishing some rapport with the artist through mediums such as music eventually win him over. With the success of Project Hail Mary and all the love that has poured in for Rocky, you'd think that a short film about human-alien contact back when interest in extraterrestrial life was at a peak would have been a bigger hit. Unfortunately, it is often such short gems that get pushed to the bottom of the sci-fi lists, but now that we've unearthed it, I hope you give it a watch and find it as wholesome and heartwarming as I did. Under the Constellation Gemini, 1979. Inspired by Igor Roksakavatsky's story The Guest, Under the Constellation Gemini was directed by Boris Ivchenko and released in 1979 amidst much praise. One of the reasons why it stands out is that it does not follow a typical sci-fi premise, but rather is a unique tale of an artificial brain, Saigon, that disappears after Professor Yavorovsky puts in a lot of effort into creating it. With a literal brain on the loose, the city also starts experiencing all sorts of strange events, ranging from books being in disarray to animals being released from zoos. And at the root of it, we learn that Saigon has used his extensive knowledge of science and fiction to create an impressive artificial organism. Now, Saigon does not return to its inventor after this accomplishment, but alas, its adventures on Earth are rather short-lived, as it is soon sent on a mission to the constellation of Gemini. The film reverses the typical sci-fi formula and puts a unique spin on human inventions and our infinite capacity for innovation, and for once, the strange entity is not an alien life form, but rather a literal human brainchild. From Stalker and pilot Pirx's Inquest to Solaris, there is no doubt that Soviet cinema has blessed us with some unique gems that widen our perspective of the sci-fi genre. Now, while some hardcore fans must have already explored these fabulous classics, I found myself shocked by the lack of their popularity in a saturated market that is often flooded with the latest hits or trendy releases. Considering the way that many Western viewers missed these gems the first time around, I'm sure you'll find a few classic recommendations for your next movie night, and I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below.